You know, I really don't think I've taken the time lately to appreciate the medium of webtoons as much as I should have. I first got introduced to it by a friend and I originally wasn't going to take it seriously and just go on about my day after hearing about it. However, because of Google listening in on everything around me, I swear to you they have to have some people in the trees or my house bugged or something spying on me, because I literally think something like I want pancakes and then I'll start getting like 80 ads for DoorDash even though I can barely afford a Hershey bar at Walmart. I proceeded to get nothing but ads for the app, and while I will go over my entire experience, that's a video in and of itself, but I wouldn't be bringing up the medium without wanting to talk about something specific in it. Enter Zero Game. I've been reading this webtoon since release, and while I don't keep up with it like I used to, mostly due to me converting from a week-to-week read to waiting for multiple episodes to come out to binge them, I decided to give it a reread from the very beginning to see exactly what I liked about it, and I wasn't disappointed. And unlike other series that I have very choice words with I would like to talk about, I want more people to actually see this series for how good it is. I mean, come on, how can this get this many reads and this peaks at less than 70k after a whole 2 years? It's criminal. There will be spoilers, who would have thought, so I would heavily suggest actually reading this series before watching me fanboy over it for however long this video is. But yeah, let's get straight into it. Mind you, I'm no professional reviewer, so if you're expecting something like that, prepare to be disappointed. Your dreams, future, and social relations. You are frustrated at your dark future. You couldn't deal with the cold hard reality, and chose death. This is a place especially for you. I'll give you a chance to set your whole life until now to zero, and rebuild it. But of course, nothing comes free. You must bet your life to come here, and I'm sure you know you're responsible for all the consequences of this choice you're making. Now, if you're ready to risk your life and participate, I'll invite you here to Zero Game. Zero Game follows the story of Hannah Yu, a girl who seems to have the world out for her. Bullied at school and unwanted by any of her family members, she falls into despair from the very beginning. Her mother and father are both gone, and she's fallen so far that she's lost any hope that her life would get better, thinking that she would just be better off dead. She begins to accept her reality, a reality where she's unwanted, a reality where nothing will truly improve, a reality where all hope she has been meaningless, until a message appears. We offer you a chance to take part in Zero Game. In a brief glimpse of hope, she dashes out, following the instructions of this mystery message that she believed to be her dead father. The first X was the entrance, the second X was the telephone pole around the corner, and the third was the entrance of her hideout. She finds herself at an abandoned building, in front of a door with a red X drawn on it, just as she had left it. Taking the chance with nothing to lose, she opens the door. This premise is nowhere near new or groundbreaking. I'm sure you could bring up any number of pieces of fiction that have the same main character wants to die just to be put into a fantasy world where they turn out to be incredibly strong plot. To that I say, cool? While I can't say the premise is truly unique, I can say a lot about Hannah in just the prologue alone. Hannah is someone we're introduced to as someone who's already fallen. A person whose life has already been torn down layer by layer until she decided that everything wasn't even worth it, despite telling herself each and every time that things would eventually get better. And while I didn't really vibe with her as much as I would have vibed with an upbeat character like Asta, or a cool and collected character like Akito at the start, something kept me invested in her for some reason. She didn't do anything to keep my interest at the very beginning like other stories would have. She just seemed like a generic run-of-the-mill depressed protagonist in a bad situation. There's nothing about her introduction that immediately pulled me in, so why did I keep reading? One of the main themes of Zero Game is progression, the process of developing or moving gradually to an advanced state. The story of Hannah Yu started her off not as a wave of progression, but introducing us to her in a stage of regression, the return to a former or less developed state. She was introduced with nothing, having lost everything up to now. Her parents who died in an accident during a vacation, her other family members who wanted nothing to do with her, and her social life, something that we had seen deteriorated at the start of the series. So when she opens the door to Zero Game, she tells herself that she still believed that her death would have left her better off, that her quality of life was not going to get better no matter how hard she tried. Her continuous days of lying to herself finally caught up with her. She believed that she had no other reason to live, even once she had entered the game. Despite this, a part of her told herself that she didn't want to die. In fact, she wanted to live. This was the first stage of her progression, learning her self-worth through a life or death encounter that she had no way of saving herself from. When she's saved by Alex Bay, please don't bully me for mispronouncing his name, I don't speak Korean at all, please don't, God, please. The 4th ranked player of the game, he asks her if she truly wanted to die, and even points out that her hands are bleeding, an effort to show that she really didn't wish for that outcome. If anything, she desperately wanted to live. Normally, a main character here would be some sort of stoic badass that just denies it, but Hannah, she starts to cry. She breaks down, spouting between tears the words, "I want to live." Something about this stuck with me, and I'm pretty sure this was one of the moments that latched me onto Hannah. Despite how far she had gone downhill, she acknowledged that she was here now for one reason: to live. I would have actually never thought to see a main character broken down like this so early in the series, and even now on rereads, I feel that sense of relatability of wanting to get back up even when you've already given up. It's the end of regression and the beginning of progression, and that's just the start of it all. The story of Zero Game puts Hannah on such a high pedestal the moment she gets in the game, putting her in a worse situation in the game than she actually was in on the outside. A change in the rankings occurs during her second encounter with a player, this player being Elliot Baek, the elder brother of Alex. In their climactic battle, a NPC by the name of Rita intervenes, declaring that a change in the rankings had just occurred, this change dropping Elliot, the current first ranked player, down to second, while setting Hannah up as the first rank. What I like about this wasn't necessarily the fact that Best Girl got the best ranking, but instead how this ranking system actually functioned. When we go through the series, we learn that the rankings don't always directly correlate to strength, but instead is attributed to the life point system, as a player enters with a specific amount of life, which is the currency of the game. A player doesn't really need to be that strong to be at the top of the ranking, just having the most life point access. This doesn't make Hannah inherently stronger than everyone simply because she's now ranked number 1, but instead she's given what is equivalent to the most currency in game, but she instead has to defend that life, basically putting a target over her head. This gives Hannah a reason to progress rather than to just live, not just to lay back simply because she has a specific amount of currency that wouldn't be fought over. She's now a part of the ranking system, at the top of the ranking at that. Something that actively puts her into the conflict and pushes her forward to surpass herself. And thankfully she does, thanks to Alex, not just once, but many times over. You need to progress in order to win, and in order to do that, there must be trust. Another theme of the series, and arguably one of the biggest themes of the series, is trust. The firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. One of the first supporting characters we meet is Alex, the 4th ranked player of the game who saves Hannah in episode 0. He refers to the game as a second hell, wondering why she even showed up in the first place unless her life was truly that terrible, showing a bit of compassion to her after that horrible situation of death. During their walk through level 1, Alex's first advice to Hannah after saving her is to not trust anyone, something that should be abundantly clear from the very beginning of a premise of a game where the winner can rebuild their entire life. Despite this initial advice, Alex and Hannah proceed to put their trust in each other in multiple instances, as well as the friends they meet along the way. This enforcing of the aspect of trust is constantly pushed towards us throughout the series, with not just being laid out to us with words, trust me, I've read trust in this series a lot when actually looking for it, but with the continuous progression of our heroes. This is especially prevalent when the operators say that in order to progress in Zero Game, you would need to put trust in others, as the two go hand in hand with each other. This trust theme is dragged out multiple times in the series, sometimes even being the key reason for Hannah progressing the way she has, even when pushing herself to the limit. Because of this aspect of trust, our heroes, through the many times they have fallen, have gotten up to fight again, with the goal of rebuilding their lives. This isn't a blind loyalty, but having been gained through various tests and trials. One of the best examples of this trust is the fight against Luke, the guildmaster of Black Poker, in the fight to get the ring to get to the next stage of the game. In episode 101, Luke, a man who has the ability to manipulate a person's vision, challenged Hannah to a best out of 3 game of concentration. Even though Hannah had won the first game, she lost the second game, not knowing how she was going to win the final game when the game was supposed to be nothing but luck. After Alex calls her to explain the trick behind the game, as the cards aren't actually cards but blank pieces of black paper, the two devise a plan to beat Luke, but it needed to involve the help of Ava, the team's healer, and Brandon, the level 3 NPC. In order for this plan to work, all three would need to work together cooperatively, starting with Hannah copying the ability of Luke. After the impression that Hannah would not be able to manipulate the vision on a small object, Brandon would take advantage of Luke's underestimation, using his authority, the ability of an NPC, to transform the blank papers into actual playing cards. Meanwhile, Hannah would be cancelling Luke's ability with the ability she just copied, with Ava healing her to keep her energy levels afloat while she was using the ability. It was an entire group effort, involving Hannah making sure Brandon wouldn't get caught and stopping Luke from flipping correct cards, Brandon transforming the cards to correct cards before they were flipped, and Ava making sure that Hannah would still stay upright until the game ended. Despite Hannah hearing that Ava was manipulated by Jay to kill Elliot, despite Brandon knowing that there are users that would kill NPCs for their authority, The entire team trusts each other entirely, not out of obligation, but because they believe in each other's abilities to get the task done. The emotion that we feel after seeing Hannah pass out is one of relief when we read the words, "we won," making us feel like it wasn't hopeless, and it was only an outcome that came out of this trust between each other. This act of trust portrays how believing in each other is able to send people far, rather than simply using others for one's own doing. Throughout this theme of trust, an enemy appears that represents the polar opposite of this idea, Jade Lin, or as we know him, Jay, the leader of the guild Red Moon. Jay represents the antithesis of the theme of trust, something that's blatantly obvious throughout our journey in the story, being someone who uses anything in their power to divide this trust between others for his own gain. We first truly meet Jay in episode 15, where he attacks Ava and Kate, two players who were helped out by our main duo in the first level's game. When Ava asks what they did for this to happen, Jay intervenes by stating that it was due to the trust they gained with Alex. Even when we see him talk to Perry, he tries to influence her ever so slightly by pointing out that Elliot was the one who killed the members of the Blue Moon, to which Perry already pointed out that she already knew. This shows a big trait about Jay from the very beginning, that he's manipulative towards anyone who's not affiliated with his team, or rather, anyone who's affiliated with the Bag Brothers. When he attacks Ava and Kate, he deflects the blame from himself towards them. It wasn't simply because he wanted to, it was because of those who trust Alex, as he's the one who destroyed Blue Moon. He's doing it to make sure that Red Moon isn't destroyed like Blue Moon was. Though, for what purpose aside from being the strongest guild, is unknown until later chapters, as an act of righteousness. Despite this distrust towards the affiliation of Alex, he does note that his main mission was to gain Hannah's trust, going so far as to fabricate an attack from Elliot's guild on Hannah at the end of the game of the first level, just to make himself look trustworthy so Hannah would join him. This does make sense, as the new first ranker is a newbie who just got into the game and had only survived up to this point by the help of Alex, someone who she hadn't even known that well to begin with. And with an asset like a first ranker on his side, he would not only get his guild size drastically increased, but also have one of the strongest members of the game at his side. By using his members as Elliot's guild, he'd be seen as a knight in shining armor to Hannah, though that isn't what ends up going down. Elliot intervenes during their attack, revealing that none of these people are actually a part of his guild. During this event, Elliot goes to try and kill Hannah and Alex, but Jay stops him from doing so, blocking his attack. When we see Elliot talk to Jay, he asks if Jay is someone that he knows and if that's why he isn't talking, but once he leaves, he reveals the face of Gina Park, the previous leader of Blue Moon. On my first read, I didn't actually realize how important this interaction was, but on the reread, everything started clicking into place. Had Jay shown his face in front of Elliot, Elliot would have simply told Alex and Hannah exactly what happened to Blue Moon, and that Jay had actually taken Gina's identity to take control of the guild. However, since he had left, this reveal of being Gina, as well as the attack from Elliot's guild, would have pushed Elliot into a bad light, ultimately pitting Hannah against the brother. It was something that I never really thought about, as Jay could have quite literally just ended the brothers here, but ended up not doing so. In the end, it just shows that Jay does anything to get what he wants, not being as much trustworthy as he is manipulative. Jay is someone that uses people as mere stepping stones to reach an end he desires, contrasting to the trusting nature that Hannah portrays throughout the story. While Hannah believes in the good in people, only sometimes blinded by a competitive spirit due to the nature of the game, Jay is the opposite, treating everyone as nothing more than pawns without truly putting any trust in them. Anyone can be tossed aside at a moment's notice. We see this when he throws Rosaline and Luke to the corpse disposal unit in Gloria's castle. Despite Rosaline being someone who was fighting on his side and was practically his ultimate weapon, she says that he wasn't even going to think about helping her out from the NPC's captivity, only using her to get to the final key to the gate of the outside world. Jay's ability is mind control, something that truly shows how the polarity between him and our main character stands out. While Copier is the ability to copy abilities, it requires the user to touch a player in order to copy their ability, giving the illusion that the person that uses it has to be trusting enough to get close to the person they're trying to copy. With this ability, Hannah has mainly copied the abilities of Love Me, the shop owner that turns out to be her mother, and Alex, someone who's been with her from the start of the game, these two people being the people she trusts the most over anyone else in the game. However, mind control has the ability to put a person under total subjugation, taking advantage of the trust that was given just to take all will away from them. Under this ability, trust is no longer something of interest. The only thing that matters is your imposing will. This ability not only displays Jay as a player, but as the foil to Hannah. Once Elliot makes his announcement in the PvP portion of the Pirate Ship of Trust, we see Jay's entire demeanor crumble. The thought of 100,000 life points being thrown out to everyone just to put a target on his head, shaking him to the core. After this event, his first thought is to use mind control on anyone who doubts him in the guild, rather than trying to defend himself or excuse his actions. Something that says a lot when players are already having doubts about him like Vincent, his right hand who would basically put his undying loyalty towards Jay. Using this ability, he negates the concept of trust entirely, imposing his will over everyone without so much as a second thought. When we see Jay fighting Hannah during the pirate ship of trust, Hannah copies the ability of mind control, and I had the thought that most fans had when reading this portion. Oh my god, Hannah could just tell Jay to go f*** off or kill himself or whatever. But on the reread, I realized that this was an important point in portraying the theme of trust, as well as a part of Hannah's character. Hannah, someone who has gotten up to this point of the game through the act of trusting others, now has copied the ability that is the antithesis to that entire idea. Jay shows his ruthlessness when confronted by Hannah, ordering everyone to kill themselves once Hannah has his ability. But once left without any options left, Hannah uses mind control on Jay, using him to release everyone from this same ability. When I first read the words from Jay, "That's it, Hannah," I didn't think much of it. But once everything kicked in, you realize that this was actually what Jay wanted. He wanted Hannah to use mind control, to perform a contradiction that went against everything the story set her up as. Even though we see Hannah throughout the rest of the story with this ability copied to find Jay, she never outright uses it, and I think that's intentional. She could have used it multiple different times before and while learning her limit breaker, but she just chooses not to. I feel like this was to represent her growing with a small part of herself, a part that was created out of impulse rather than thinking it out, forcing her to stoop as low as Jay, imposing her will over others rather than working together with others to stop him. This incident will be something that follows her, a mistake that goes against everything she had been doing. Despite having this powerful ability that could quite literally carry her throughout the game, it would feel like betraying her own ideals, doing everything in her power to win, regardless of who they were and disregarding them entirely, something Jay was doing himself. Using that power would be her doing exactly what Jay was doing, manipulating people rather than gaining their trust, something that Jay would have wanted. Having Jay be the enemy of Hannah was brilliant. These are one of my favorite types of conflicts. The conflicts where the two characters, our main protagonist and our antagonist, are the ones with two completely conflicting ideals of the themes of the story. The side of our hero is constantly pushed by the antagonist's complete opposite way of thinking, and when the hero's actions are suddenly flipped to be the same as the antagonist's, we get a sense of unease and guilt, a feeling that what we just did was now being held over us, even if it was just for a moment. The hypocrisy in that moment is what carries this conflict. You know, I don't think I can say that I genuinely dislike any of the characters in this series. At least none of them you aren't supposed to dislike. Even Jay, the main antagonist of the series up to this point, is a character I enjoy seeing, despite how much the series shows that he's a bad guy. Though if you couldn't tell, my favorite character is obviously Hannah, but it's not simply just because she's best girl. While reading, Hannah felt the most human to me. She was a person who you could tell the author had a lot of interest in writing and fleshing out. Hannah is a person who lost her parents at the age of 8 and had been alone for 10 years after an incident that was intended to just be a happy family gathering. You'd think that an incident like that would change someone drastically. This is where this scene comes in. After making an alliance with Elliot and hearing everything he and her father, the operator, talked about, Hannah confronts Elliot. After sending Alex inside, the two sit down under the night sky in silence, with Elliot waiting for Hannah to say something. Face to face with the boy who was involved in the incident regarding her parents' deaths, the boy that was now provoking her by saying that he was responsible for her being alone all this time, she chooses to ask him one thing: "Are you okay?" Rather than lashing out, she takes a more compassionate approach, asking if he's alright instead of worrying about her own feelings. You can see Elliot's agitation when she asks this question and expresses concern, as he was the one trying to spark a reaction out of her in the beginning. The dissection of his life by Hannah is something that disturbs him, something he verbally confirms when she explains how his mindset probably was before he came to Zero Game. She draws parallels to herself, the two of them working hard to try and keep their quality of life high just for all of it to fall apart, forcing them both into this game. Elliot was a person who wanted to strictly rely on himself, not putting any trust in others when he felt that he could solve everything on his own. During the Red Moon flashback, he takes Alex's body with a pair change, leaving him to kill most of the Blue Moon Guild. Even when he could have explained everything to the part of the team that wasn't under the influence of Jay, he actively chose not to, opting to start the massacre himself. Even when Alex tries to help him, he shuts him off, believing in solitude, being the eldest with the most responsibility on his shoulders, no matter who they were. Whereas Hannah is the complete opposite, trusting strangers who didn't even prove their worth to her in any way, simply because they all deserve a chance. She knew nothing about Ava and Kate during the first level, and yet she gave them a chance to do their part. When she meets Johan, she allows him to join them in the game of the second level, despite Michaela telling him that he already cleared the game multiple times. Hannah has been taught to be trusting towards others, believing that this trust is deserved among everyone and everyone needs someone to lean on. while Elliot's trust is only placed in himself, believing that he was the only one who he needed. One path leads to the eventual self-destruction of oneself, while the other is helped up by the hands that they have held. When Elliot asks Hannah if she resents him for what had happened, she tells him that she does, something that would be normal for any person to feel. No matter what she had done and how much of her previous life she had to live, she wouldn't have the chance to be with her parents like she would have before. But then, she says the words, "I can't really bring myself to say harsh things to you. You're a mess already, so what's the point of hurting you anyways?" As much as she did despise the outcome, as much as she does resent Elliot for what had happened, she couldn't bother when she was in the same position, in the same lows as he was. She shut herself off from Elliot's parents, who made sure that she was okay each year on her parents' death anniversary. She accepted her fate in the Zero game, only to be helped by a selfless character. Even when she would try to stand on her own, she was now being pushed by someone close to her to lean on them if she ever needed help. When Hannah says the line, "You're a mess anyways," it also refers to herself. She was also a mess. After all, she was in this game. She couldn't say anything harsh, not because she couldn't hurt Elliot, but because it wouldn't make her feel better. Unlike Elliot, who tried to get a reaction out of her, Hannah was someone who wasn't moved by those comments. She had already been through hell. What was a few more nasty comments towards her going to do? This scene is really great. I can't begin to describe the emotions I feel while reading it over and over again, finding new ways of interpreting this the more chapters that come up. The two of them are very similar, something that made me feel for these two. Both broken souls now working on repairing their own lives. Hannah is a person who believes in the best in people, something we avidly see in this game of death. Unlike a character who is blindly loyal to their lawful good archetype just because, Hannah is handled differently. During the game of the second level, Hannah decides to take an approach to clear the game by helping the child that resurrected Lucifer, Mika, rather than outright killing him. During this exchange, she tries to defend the boy, only to watch as Mika is killed right before her eyes. After seeing this, she begins to question if she could really go through with everything up to this point. When I first entered this game, I thought I could do anything to bring my parents back, that I could even kill people. At least, that's what I thought. But my mind keeps stopping me, telling me not to do bad things. Even now, when I thought I helped Mika. I don't regret this, but why is it so hard to make up my mind? Hannah isn't someone who's simply a character that can do no wrong. She struggles with her decisions, much like a normal person would in these situations. She constantly shows worry that what she's doing isn't right in her eyes, something taught by her late parents that she continues to stand by after 10 years. Just as she's feeling like giving up, Johan comes to her side. Everyone has their own way of living. It's in your nature. You can't harm others. You don't have to choose a path that doesn't fit you. There are always different pathways to reach a goal. There's no right or wrong answer. It's up to you to choose yours. Have faith in the path that you think is right, and walk on. Her struggle isn't one where it's one opposing force against another, not simply black and white. It's up to her to decide what she thinks is right, to pave her own path. After all, there is no right or wrong answer to your own morals. It's all subjective. She has this lawful good exterior because it's what she was raised with, and trying to heel turn away from it is something that will logically not be easy to do. And I think this little moment in the second game, as well as the scenes I've talked about before, really solidify why I like Hannah so much as a character. She is what we would see as a good character, but is more connected to us than anyone else we've seen up to this point. And that relatability is what makes her Hannah. Another character I really enjoyed was Rosaline, the woman who worked alongside Jay in the Red Moon Guild. Rosaline was a woman who was originally a part of Blue Moon before Elliot's rebellion and the rebranding into Red Moon, now working as a double agent for Jay. While she was someone I originally wrote off as just a character that would show up for plot convenience, since that was what she first showed up as, being a way to help Elliot use his ability at night, her character really pops out working under Jay as the Red Cloak. We learn of her backstory in episode 89, where we see her relationship with her family before she enters Zero Game. Her mother works her to be the best, not for the betterment of Rosaline as a person, but to get back at the husband that divorced her, a truly selfish goal. It is at this point that we see Rosaline's mindset that has been presented to us. Rosaline had been someone who was confident in her abilities, always fighting with a smirk on her face until she was blatantly outmatched or outnumbered. Due to this confidence, she found happiness in being the best, as being the best acted as a way of being accepted, in not only her life, but the aspects of the game. Through her life, she lived the lie of being happy if she was the best, and working beside Jay, she was given the ability to be the best, an authority to stand above players, the potential of a player to stand above the NPCs. Her potential was limitless, until Hannah appeared. Hannah was the one that broke this happiness in front of her. showing that she wasn't the only person who could be on that pedestal of the best. After gaining Crescent's authority, Hannah rivals Rosaline in strength, and that is something that Rosaline even points out to Jay, calling her a monster even worse than her. After this encounter, Rosaline's aspect of happiness is shattered, being taken away into the custody of Gloria, the main NPC of level 3, and the wife of the man that she killed for his system. We see the way these two interact together, and it's relatively surprising. The NPC who swore everything against players due to what happened with her significant other, now face to face with her husband's murderer. You'd think that the first thing she does would be to go out for an attack, or to at least insult her, but she doesn't. We see her giving Rosaline gifts. She simply states that she doesn't need them anymore considering the ones she was going to give them to perished. When Rosaline questions why she's being given gifts, Gloria gives her a speech, explaining that Rosaline does know the difference between right and wrong in her actions, and that she shouldn't be getting swallowed up in her own messed up state in a world where her future and happiness can be decided by herself. She didn't need to be the best. She could find her own happiness on her own, in her own way. In episode 106, during her imprisonment, Gloria has a discussion with Rosaline, telling her that she can change her back into a normal user by taking her system from her. But Rosaline declines this offer at first, still wanting to go back to meet her mother. A part of her wants to go back, to show her mother how strong she had become, that she's the best now, to get the acceptance and happiness that she wanted. But even when she has the power to do so, she breaks down, saying that she wants to live more like a human being and not like a monster. Her happiness was representative of a mask that she wore throughout the series in the form of that confidence in being the best. Rather than wanting to keep that mask on, she chooses to discard it, accepting the part of herself that just wanted to be herself, not someone who was solely focused on strength. She cries in Gloria's arms, asking why she couldn't have just loved herself from the beginning, the path that Gloria had alluded to in regards to the wrong and right path. This was what separated the children of Gloria from Rosaline, the regard for themselves and their own happiness, something Rosaline never considered while in Zero Game. After this, we see Rosaline in a new light, outright betraying Jay by taking Gloria's key and giving it to Noise, the system of Zero Game, rather than helping out Jay with the gate to the outside world, something that led her to the original end goal, choosing to allow the reset of the game rather than opening the gate. I like Rosaline not just for her design, but also for her character arc. Someone who is obsessed with being the best, choosing to progress down her own path that would lead her to being who she truly wanted to be. Identity changing tickets to change her looks, heinous acts to get absurd powers to become stronger than other players, even being the secret weapon on the biggest guild of the game, all of these were just different actions towards being the best. But Rosaline throws it all away to be herself, something that coincides with what Johan told Hannah in the level 2 game. Everyone has their own way of living. You don't have to choose a path that doesn't fit you. It's up to you to choose yours. Have faith in the path that you think is right and walk on. Rosaline is following the advice that Hannah had gotten, being something that is universal throughout the series that Hannah emphasized when fighting against Rosaline. There's no wrong answer to living life, that's how living works. Rosaline tried to argue against this ideal during their encounter, calling her feeble-minded and saying that it was an excuse just to cover it all up. But this was due to Hannah accepting her own happiness, and Rosaline has to accept it for herself. Once she had, she leaned towards the future, acting more rambunctious and cocky when she's handing the key to Noise. Now that's a character arc if I've ever seen one. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that Zero Game's art style is my favorite art style of any webtoon or manhwa out there. Like, there are some cool panels here and there that I just can't explain how cool they look without outright gushing over them. I'm not really an art major, as you could tell, considering I said in the last video that I can't afford to go to art school, but this art style really appeals to me for some reason. There are just some panels that just remind me of Clamp and their designs, like Alex looking pissed off at Jay when Alice is attacked. Maybe it's the mouth or something, I think that's it. But the action is where it really hits different. Like, some of these panels look really beautiful when it comes to the fighting, and you can really tell the emotion behind some of these characters when they're drawn the way that they are. The mood is always portrayed well in each scene, and the expressions on these characters display the emotions of these scenes really well. I don't really know how to describe art, but those who actually did go to art school could probably explain it better than me. Art is really subjective, so you might not like it as much as I do, so I won't really dwell on the topic too much. After all, I'm not suited that much to talk about it. The power system here is pretty alright. Even though there are multiple different branches, it isn't as confusing as it may initially seem. So allow me to make it sound like the most complicated power system possible. Special abilities are classified under 3 different categories: passive skills, abilities, and authorities, or systems. Passive skills are abilities that are given to a player at the beginning of the game, and can only be used once every 24 hours. These usually aren't offensive, and usually act like status ailments or debuffs rather than just being big boom. There is the potential to use passives offensively, like Alice being able to use levitation to send objects at Hannah to hit her, but most of the passives that we've seen mostly worked as debuffs or movement type abilities. Abilities, however, do not follow this and can be virtually anything, ranging from creating light to manipulating blood to altering gravity to even seeing the energy of other people. These are usually the abilities that are used offensively, while the others work as more of an added layer that you would also have to deal with. They also have their own ranking system, with hidden abilities being the strongest abilities, though they have the largest downsides. The higher the rank, the larger the downsides, like Hannah's Copier draining stamina very quickly for being a hidden ability, or Elliot's Shadow being a triple S rank but it inherently needing light to work. Finally, there are authorities, or systems, or whatever you want to call them. These are basically abilities, but specifically for NPCs, making them obviously more cracked than the other aforementioned effects. These are generally game-breaking skills that would be seen as too powerful if in the hands of a regular player. For example, the ability to copy anything, not just abilities, or the ability to create a spear that can erase anything. Yeah, those are kinda nuts. However, there are other factors that come into play aside from strictly offense or defense or outright hacks. Authorities can be cancelled out by other authorities in combat, but an ability doesn't get directly cancelled out by another ability like that, though abilities can be mixed with authorities in order to be able to deal damage to others with those aforementioned abilities. This is why characters like Hannah and Rosaline are considered to be monsters by Rosaline and Jay, because they can just fight with one half of their full power set while keeping the other half or in the back burner, or even mixing them. Even on the Pirate Ship of Trust, when everyone had the full advantage of the situation with an ability, an authority, and more numbers than Rosaline, they couldn't outright beat her. Even Elliot says that Rosaline could have escaped his shadow prison at any time she wanted, which just shows how broken all three of these would be together. Let's see, is there anything else I forgot to mention? Oh yeah, pair changes. As one of the dumbest in the good way game mechanics, also allows you to transfer bodies with your pair, which also transfers your abilities, with the only indication of the pair change having occurred is that the color of the user's eyes have changed with whoever they changed with. I feel like the power system, while not being as insanely thought out and complex as something like Nen from Hunter x Hunter, or as versatile as Key from Dragon Ball, the power system does have its own little flair to add to the series, as most characters are relatively unique in their abilities and how they use them to their advantage, like Alex being able to send electricity through a hallway full of wires just to conduct his ability through the water and in turn the entire hallway. It isn't strictly just how much stronger you are, there's a bit more to it than that. As for final thoughts, I want to talk about why I believe Zero Game seemingly flopped from the very beginning. Despite these numbers, practically no one talks about it, and even things like any sort of social media presence is non-existent, which is weird considering this has been around on Naver, a literal search engine that has the extra added spot for webtoons and isn't even a site used to directly push them forward like the actual webtoon app since 2016, and has been consistently doing well for itself. So why did no one seemingly take interest in it compared to other webtoons that were released at that same time? I believe one of these reasons is actually the forward planning and the pacing of the series at the start. Like I said prior, Hannah wasn't a character that I immediately grabbed interest in. She seemed really one note. However, the longer you read into the story, the more you got to sympathize with her and understand her, watching her influence on the rest of the characters around her. The beginning of the story isn't as perfectly paced as the rest of the series. After all, the events of the first level's game of the series last upwards of 8 chapters, while the events of the second level's game lasted up to 15 chapters, almost double the amount of the first levels. There was also the inherent problems with Webtoons translations involving the series. There are often typos littered throughout the series and just straight up mistakes, like Jay being referred to as a female despite Zell confirming that he was male. And while I don't know enough about the Korean language to know everything about honorifics, I'm glad that was at least somewhat rectified on Jay's reveal from taking Gina Park's identity. There was also the events around the plot itself. Zero Game was a story that played around with different aspects of the story and foreshadowed events that will be important later on. Now, while that is generally expected of stories nowadays, Zero Game focused more on the mystery of things in the story rather than the action like other series around the same time were. This led to a lack of interest due to the lack of actual fighting in a fantasy series that was initially presented as a death game where the main character's life is on the line, and felt more like a new age seasonal isekai. Not only that, but it also began competing with the other popular genre of webtoon being romance, something that Zero Game never truly delved too much on as a concept, only being pointed out in specific instances. Having to deal with series like Lore Olympus, True Beauty, and I Love You, as well as many other prominent series, just pushed it to the wayside, not letting it show its true potential when the series truly catches up during the second level. The series does eventually grow from most of these problems, but the initial impact from the first wave made the series less enjoyable to readers and ended up making them drop it altogether, something that really saddened me because the potential behind the series really shone in the later translated chapters. Thanks for watching. I really wanted to put this out considering that the series is coming up on the end of one of the first big arcs it had, and while I initially wanted to wait and see if anything I said was going to be immediately contradicted during the final battle, I would have to wait a couple of months for that, and even though there are over 100 chapters leading into the next arc, I cannot read Korean, who would have thought? And considering that the series is doing relatively well on Naver, I'm really surprised the series has such a small following in English. Even though I've talked about this for about 30 minutes or so, I will say that the series is not perfect, especially if you're reading the webtoon translations. If you're one of those people who get really tilted at things like misgendering or typos, then the series isn't for you. But if you can look past that or can read Korean, then I'd highly encourage you to give it a read. I feel like there hasn't been a whole lot of English readers out there actually talking about it like some other webtoons out there, so I wanted to give the series a lot of love despite its shortcomings. But I can't make you read it, just like I can't make you hit that like and subscribe button down below, but if you really want to, you can. That being said, if you did like the video, be sure to hit that sub button, but if you didn't like the video, give me a fat dislike and an angry comment telling me why you hated it. Anyways, that's all for now. Ciao.
Purchase your tracks today. Hot